I think over the last maybe 6-8 weeks, when sentiment had soured quite meaningfully, the question was that do we now have to go to fiscal stimulus? Now, if this announcement is coming from a place of worry about the current economic situation, then it probably doesn't do very much, right? Because you could have taken that same 1.45 lakh crore and chosen to use it in a way which had more direct impact on the economy, such as a consumption stimulus. But you haven't chosen to do that. So the current economic situation does not really get addressed because of this, by this?
What it does do is, at the margin, change sentiment. There was this belief among many people that this government was kind of, anti-rich or anti-corporate, didn't believe that corporates were necessary and all that. This changes that view. At the margin, it will, I think, perhaps encourage some people to be slightly more forthcoming. But this is consistent with the government's view or the government's stance so far that we need to prioritize investment over consumption, right? So the objective is to bring down interest rates, because at the margin, so if we all assume that this 1.45 lakh crores is all going to add up to the bond issuance by state and central governments. If you think about the arithmetic, about 84,000 crores, 840 billion rupees comes to the cost will be borne by the center, 58% of this. 42%, which is about 600 billion or 60,000 crores, goes to the states. Given that the states mostly can't breach the 3% fiscal deficit target, they'll have to cut expenditure. To the extent that, as RBI reported, the aggregate fiscal deficit target was about 2.4%, maybe there'll be slightly more fiscal deficit in some states. But this largely means that they have to curtail expenditure somewhere. Similarly, at the central level, this the PM Kisan, the budgeted number is 85,000 crores, but as you must have seen, the governments at the state level seem to be struggling to identify these farmers. So instead of the 14 crore farmers that the center identified, they seem to be able to find only 7 crore farmers, and therefore that's running at about half the pace at which it should. That's a 40,000 crore saving. So that's like and the remaining 40,000 crores could also come from some curtailment of expenditure. Even if it doesn't, that's a very small cost to pay. So what the government seems to be prioritizing is, again, investment over consumption. And I don't think the government is as worried as markets and companies are about the next 6 months of growth. I think they're taking it to the long haul. They realize that the fiscal discipline that they observe and the very hard focus on inflation that we have seen from this government over the last 5-6 years should result in much lower interest rates. And I'm sure you'll have questions on the bond yields after this, but should result in lower interest rates. And therefore, this is very good for the economy if you're thinking 3-5 years out. And this actually would put to rest any further speculation on a fiscal stimulus. So this clearly shows that no consumption stimulus is coming, and so the government may be willing to just ride through this down cycle, and therefore it can get quite worse. And that, to answer the question on the interest rate before you even ask it, that if this had been a consumption stimulus, it would have been even more of a risk to interest rates, that is the risk of raising interest rates, because if it is just pure consumption stimulus, it would be at the margin inflationary, especially if it is funded by RBI's open market purchases of bonds. Whereas something that adds to capacity, potentially, and that too not in the near term but 2 years out, and is actually the cuts are funded by curtailment of expenditure at the state level and potentially at the central level as well, is actually negative for inflation, and therefore the immediate reaction in the bond market notwithstanding, this should mean lower interest rates a year out.